the world?
It's breezy and cool, and we had a spectacular dawn.
Oh, awesome. Would it be okay if we recorded the session? Would you be okay with that?
It's fine.
Let me just start that.
I already started recording.
All right, thank you, Yonca, for that. All right, so without further ado, then, let me just introduce you then.
Great.
All right, so I welcome you all on behalf of Ege University's European Languages and Cultures Research and Application Center's webinar talk this evening. We'll be hosting Christopher Volpe and his work. Volpe's work, a series of Melville-related paintings in tar, oil paint, and gold leaf called Loomings, after Moby Dick's first chapter, will be shown in two upcoming exhibitions at the Institute of Art and Design at New England College in New Hampshire and at Cove Street Arts Contemporary Gallery in Maine. This evening, he'll be introducing his multidisciplinary project he organized for our students involving creative artistic responses to Moby Dick. And I must say it's very exciting to have you here with us. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here as well. And very psyched to see this international interest in not only in Melville, but in interdisciplinary approaches that involve visual art. There's a rich tradition of artistic responses, and in fact, visual art is embedded within the novel in various ways, as I'm sure you realize. So it's really nice to see that aspect coming to life like this for young people especially. It's terrific. So let me just pull up my presentation here. I have a slide presentation, and I will walk through it right now. Here we are. Whoops, come back. Okay. There we are. Okay, let me put this into play mode. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, awesome.
Good. All right, great. So I will introduce myself a little bit and my work first, and then get into what I have been doing and what I see working with you and the students in Moby Dick and the Arts. So this is a typical painting from my series called Loomings, which is of course named after the first chapter of Moby Dick. You're looking at a painting in tar and oil paint and gold leaf. And we see a ship dissolving into a hazy atmosphere. A friend of mine said it looked like the cosmos was falling, which I very much like that idea. I'm titling it Westward after the name of a painting called Westward, the Course of Empire Takes Its Way, which has an interesting history in itself. This was a painting commissioned by the United States government to promote settling of the West of the United States at any cost. And it was parodied even in its time by another painter who created a painting with the same title, but showed a train bearing down on a small family of deer in the midst of a clear-cut field of trees. So I'm playing on that trope, but extending it to the entire colonial project of the westward expansion, and all in a title. Let me introduce the project first, and then I'll talk a little bit more about my work and what I see. So this is an opportunity for students to respond in visual art to the themes you will be highlighting in the novel. So I plan to introduce 20th and 21st artistic responses to the novel for inspiration, and to identify how visual art works with themes, and to allow students to choose their own theme to create their own work in response to that theme within the novel. There'll be a series of Zoom meetings and one-on-one meetings that we'll be doing to facilitate this. And finally, there will be a presentation on January 13th at the joint conference where each student will show their work, as I'm hoping, a slide, and then and also a short supporting artist statement, which I will coach the writing of, that will help contextualize the work and what they're thinking and how they see it fitting in with the rest of your pedagogy. So, background on my Looming series. I have a background in English and American literature, mostly American literature, and I read Moby Dick as an undergraduate, and it didn't really stick to me then. But a few years ago, after about 10 years or so into a career as a visual artist, I reread the novel, and I was struck by the description of a painting very early on in the book. Ishmael walks into the Spouter Inn in New Bedford and sees a strange dark painting on the wall and describes it in very lyrical and evocative terms, imaginative terms. He tries to imagine what it is a picture of, because it's so difficult to discern what it is. And he says maybe it's a sea in a storm, or, and then he gets even more fanciful, maybe it's the unnatural combat of the four primal elements, so air, earth, water, and fire fighting each other. It's a blasted heath, a Hyperborean winter scene, the breaking up of the icebound stream of time. So all of this, he finally decides that it is a ship, and this is, by the way, a still from the 1953 movie with John Huston called adaptation of Moby Dick. And if you observe the painting, if there's a giant whale leaping over a ship, and that is in fact what the painting is of. It says the artist's design seemed this: a Cape Horner, a ship going around the Horn in a hurricane, the half foundered, so almost sunk ship, capsizing with its three broken masts still visible, and an exasperated whale trying to leap right over the ship is in the act of impaling himself on the mastheads. So it's a really surreal visual image right from the beginning of the book. Well, this captivated me as a painter. As I say, I'd never read Moby Dick as a painter, so I immediately, upon this encountering this description, began imagining what that painting would look like and whether I could paint it from the description. Some research revealed that Melville owned a print of a painting by the English Romantic painter Turner. And I figured that these two paintings, he owned the one on the right as a print, fairly represented his description of this difficult to see scene, almost abstract. You can see in this one on the right, this is in fact a steamship in a snowstorm, but it does look very like a kind of just chaotic scene of all the elements swirling together. So I was aware that there have been visual artistic responses to Moby Dick throughout American art, in particular the late 1940s and 1950s. The novel enjoyed a resurgence then, but it also enjoyed a cult status among the most important visual artists of that time. And these would be the abstract expressionists, at least in America, the most important. So we have a large body of work of abstract paintings that respond to Melville's novel. Jackson Pollock's Moby Dick, 1943. Sam Francis, The Whiteness of the Whale, 1957. Paul Jenkins, Homage to Melville, 1953, where we can see what looks like a wounded whale. And this particular painting, too, I had not seen until recently, but it's striking. I feel this painting fully engages with the violence at the heart of the novel. And there's a question of why did the novel Moby Dick become so important for American art at this period? And several scholars have answered that this was a tough, the mid-century in American art, artists lost faith in the history of European art and needed a decisive break from it. And and this is similar to Melville's novel, which corresponds also to an age of the loss of belief in tradition and in history and in religion and in so many ways that you will be talking about with your students as well. I have a particular bias toward one of the abstract expressionists, who's Franz Klein. You see his work here in the bottom here. And there's an English artist on the top named John Virtue, who also paints in black and white. And so this opportunity, these things fused in my mind, and I chose, this is my painting that answers to Melville's description. As you can see, the whale is what he calls, I think, a large dark mass, sort of hovering in the center of the painting here. And you can see the three masts of the ship that's just barely visible as it disappears into the foam. And this was the first in the series. So once I did this one, I decided that this is what I would do for a while. This is another painting of the also called Painting at the Spouter Inn, again in tar mostly. This one's more abstract and more indeterminate, but in fact it does have the whale in the center and barely visible ship down here, so the motif is there. And I chose an antique frame for it because of the 19th century context. So to do these paintings, I'm using tar, which comes in the form of a liquid that I can thin and treat just like oil paint, as long as I add some drying matter, some drying chemicals to it so that it will become archival. And it lends itself to a wide variety of expression. This is one of the other early paintings in this series. And each painting in this series has a title which references Moby Dick. So this one is called Any Human Thing, and it corresponds to a quote, "I promise nothing complete, because any human thing supposed to be complete must for that very reason infallibly be faulty." That's Melville's pronouncement of the futility of human endeavor, or at least reason, or at least the ability to comprehend our place in the universe. We are necessarily an incomplete thing, says Melville. This is a close-up of the ship in the center, so you can see better what it looks like. And this is very gestural paintings, very like the abstract expressionists, I think, only with a more solid grounding in content. And the tar functions for me also as a signifier for industrialization. This is another painting from the series. Again, a ship on the horizon there, entirely made of tar. And the choice of black and white was instinctive, but it turns out there's also a tradition of black and white paintings and prints that illustrate or correspond or respond to the novel. On the right, you see a Rockwell Kent illustration from 1930 from the novel. Rockwell Kent did a very complete illustrative project in 1930. There's another one on the right from Rockwell Kent for the edition of Moby Dick. However, the one on the left is one of the first illustrations for Moby Dick. It's from the 1890s, and it's a woodcut. And I actually saw an interesting similarity between the two woodcuts here, but also significant differences. So in continuing the tradition of black and white for Moby Dick, in 1972, Barry Moser did a series of illustrations for Moby Dick. And in 2014, one of two graphic novels based on Moby Dick was published, also in black and white. And here's the other one, French Chaboté, Moby Dick graphic novel, really beautifully done and quite intense. One of the other abstract expressionists, Robert Motherwell in 1950, also explicitly mentions Moby Dick and his use of black and white. And this is something I didn't know when I began the series. He references the chapter on the whiteness of the whale, and he said, and this is the beginning of his fascination with black and white, which would become the hallmark of his entire body of work. The one on top is a small painting called The Tomb of Captain Ahab, and the one on the right is a study for Elegy of the Spanish Republic, his monumental large-scale paintings that repeat the motif for decades. But here's what he says about the black. Grows deeper and deeper, darker and darker before me. It menaces me like a black gullet, like a giant maw or mouth. And he says only love for painting in this instance is able to cover the fearful void. So he plays with this idea of black and white. He says the ultimate tone of darkness. I use it as non-being, he identifies it with, and then white being life or being. So he pares painting down to its essentials and its symbols of life and death, being and non-being. And this is very appropriate, I think, for art related to the novel. So here are a few more pieces from the Looming series in tar. Each one of these has a ship on the horizon in a sea of tar under troubled skies. This one is called The Burning Ship. There's an amazing chapter in Moby Dick where the whale's blubber is processed factory-like right on board into oil. And I emphasize when I do talk about the series that it's clear that Melville wants us to think of the voyage of the Pequod, at least in the beginning, as a commercial venture. He spends an entire chapter on the ship's owners and their hypocrisy and greed. Being Quakers, they should be pious and compassionate, but in fact, they're grasping and greedy. And he makes that clear. And of course, Melville, Ahab diverts the mission from no longer a commercial one to one of, personal vendetta against the Leviathan. But it's not lost on me that whale oil was the original fuel for the Industrial Revolution. It was key to the rise of industrialization, and it was America's first globally dominant industry, which was supplanted only by the discovery of oil and the refining and pumping of oil from the ground that replaced whale oil and became the cornerstone of the contemporary global economy. And many would say the weak link in the chain of human progress. We are now in a dire situation of climate crisis and social turmoil for which there may be no turning back. These are the colors of fossil fuel use. here. These are all photographs of contemporary oil processing facilities, and it's interesting to me that these are also the colors of my paintings, and it's no coincidence. I'm using literally a byproduct of this process to make these paintings. The tar that I use is produced in the refining of oil. It is a fossil fuel product. In this particular painting called Any Human Thing number 4, The Whaler as Derrick, I tried to conflate the shape of a 19th century ship, whaling ship, with the derrick, the classic oil derrick, which spews oil into the air and when it's struck, and then the oil, the crude oil, the black substance rains down again upon the earth. Here's another painting from the series. I already explained the origin of the title here. This is Westward number 2. As a close-up of the ship, and I sometimes try to make the ships look like tankers. Here's another painting from earlier in the series, based on the speech that Ahab gives to whip up his men into a frenzy and follow him on his doomed mission. While he's giving his speech, the Corpus Santos, or St. Elmo's fire, hits the rigging of the ship, and these bits of fire come almost infernal hellfires come to adorn the masts. And I used the gold leaf in this case to represent the fire. This is one of the most, I guess, representational of and close to illustrative of the series. It's called Dive, and it represents, well, I'll just read you the quote. This is from Moby Dick. O Ahab, what shall be grand in thee? It must needs be plucked from the skies and dived for in the deep and featured in the unbodied air. I like the conflation of the celestial and the aquatic here. And this is called Surely All This Is Not Without Meaning, rather like the black gullet that Motherwell imagined for the color black when thinking about Moby Dick. So that's my introduction to my own work. I plan to, with the students, also spend some time showing work from the 1900s and our century related to Moby Dick. One of the most well-known bodies of work related to the novel is Frank Stella's series on Moby Dick. He has done hundreds of these multimedia abstractions, and they began as prints, as you see on the left, and soon evolved into sort of three-dimensional painting / sculptures on the right. He was one of the first painters to break the square framed format for paintings that has become a standard way of approaching painting today for contemporary artists. And this follows one particular theme, what Melville calls the spirit spout. When the men see a spout far off in the moonlight, you see the whale spout. And on the left is Rockwell Kent's illustration. In the center is Frank Stella's 1990s interpretation, and on the right is my own response to the passage. And I'll read the passage. It was while gliding through these latter waters that one serene and moonlit night, when all the waves rolled by like scrolls of silver, and by their soft suffusing seethings made what seemed a silvery silence, not a solitude. On such a silent night, a silvery jet was seen far in advance of the white bubbles at the bow. Lit up by the moon, it looked celestial, seemed some plumed and glittering god uprising from the sea. Matt Kish is a contemporary artist who has become very well known for his work on Moby Dick. He created one painting for every page. Well, it's not paintings, they're prints, illustrations. He's an illustrator, but they are unusual as illustrations, of course, because they're just ambiguous works of art in their own right. But he created one for every page in Moby Dick. So there are 552 illustrations. Sometimes he actually incorporates the page, like the two on the left. You can discern just barely behind the imagery the actual page of the novel that he's responding to. But he doesn't always do that. These are abstract paintings based on the novel, again, by a Belgian artist who's working today. And these are small format paintings, not large, probably about, well, 2 feet by 2 feet. It's a good size, but not huge. Of course, there was In the Heart of the Sea, one of the most recent adaptations of Moby Dick, or at least of the historical encounter with the angry sperm whale that inspired Moby Dick. And the image on the right is total fantasy, of course. It's the stuff of science fiction, the stuff of nightmares, but it's very effective in setting up one of the themes, I think, of Moby Dick, the enormity and malignity of nature and the frailty and sort of groundlessness of human endeavor. That was the poster for the movie. So what I'm showing are just various artistic responses to themes that come from the novel. This is, of course, from the opera Moby Dick, which is, I think it was 2008 or maybe later, maybe 2018. But this is an opera which is being performed now in various places all over the world. I have not seen it yet, but this is the set design. It's quite interesting. I like the celestial nature of it. Michael Zama, The Eye of the Whale, 2009. This is a painting I just encountered the other day. I like the mix of abstraction and then the riveting eye. It's striking. Here's a different media response. This is film by Tacit Dean, the British artist. And it's abstract, but as you can see, if you look closely, this is in fact a beast, a leviathan with sharp teeth. This is an Argentine artist, Adrian Villar Rojas, and this is a life-sized model, sculpture, not a model, sculpture. Very interesting, not just a whale, but a whale with these protruding spikes, and clearly a dying whale. What does it mean? Very interesting. More of this artist's work, the same piece from a different angle, in black and white. And a landlocked whale. So I will discuss themes available to response to the students, among them social themes like racial stereotypes, slavery, hierarchies, politics, but more existential ones as well, like self versus otherness, religion, and spirituality, which are addressed differently in the novel, and mysticism, which is both embraced and parodied by Melville, because Ahab becomes something of a mystic as well in his madness. We'll talk about cosmology, reason and perception, social mores, as we see in Queequeg. There's been, of course, a lot of interest in the relationship between Ishmael and Queequeg, a cannibal who Melville paints with somewhat homoerotic overtones as they share a bed and perform what Queequeg calls a marriage. It's a very interesting aspect that's being looked at by many scholars now. But industrialization and sustainability is present in the novel, and that is what I address in my work. But also humanity versus nature, the individual versus society, the individual versus the self, the divided self. Ahab literally has a split down himself, a large scar that proceeds from his head to his feet. And that is, I think, emblematic of the split self, the 19th and 20th century preoccupation with existentialism. Who am I now that I don't know who I am? Good versus evil. And after we discuss some of these themes, I'll be asking for feedback from the students on these. We'll look at some work and we'll ask what themes are embodied in them. Now, this is a very postmodern sculpture based on Moby Dick, but what are the themes here? The themes I think we could talk about with this work are mechanization, industrialization, but you can also see the shapes of 19th century ship equipment, the point of the spear, the hoisting. I see the hull of a ship here. I see an entire little symbolic of the ship here with a circle through it. Like, what does that circle mean? Is that the cosmos? But mostly, I see industrialization here and the continuity of the need for whaling and whale oil and today's massive industrialization of the planet. Another life-size sculpture, this one in wool and felt, called Moby Dick. Mocha Dick, which was the name of the whale that Moby Dick was supposedly based on, by American artist Tristan Lowe. And so, what themes have we here? I would say self and other. The whale is otherness. So I see the alienation of humanity from nature, and I think you could talk about the oddness of a whale encountered in ordinary, daily context. Itself is a jarring juxtaposition that goes to the heart of the kind of questions Melville wants to ask in the novel. So that will be one of the aspects of the project. We'll be talking about how visual art embodies themes. This particular painting on the left looks like just some pretentious postmodern nonsense until you get the context and realize it's from a series called Whiteness of the Whale. It is pages of the novel that are attached to Belgian linen and then paint is applied over top with spray gun, acrylic paint, over the book pages. And this goes to aspects of American and international abstract art, but also to the whiteness and what whiteness means. This particular painting was produced by Tim Rollins and his KOS, or Kids of Survival project, where he worked with junior high school students in the South Bronx to create visual manifestations of the book and their response to it. I like this quote here. All of the works were painted on texts, carefully assembled in a grid-like fashion. We discussed the books and all their significant symbology. But these visual manifestations were much more than illustration. We considered them to be conversations with the authors and composers. We followed Ralph Waldo Emerson's maxim that books are to be used, not just read. And that will be the heart of what we do. So session one, I think we're looking at 3 Zoom sessions with students. The first is a slide lecture, and I'll talk about themes, and through interactive conversation, students will settle on a theme, and through email follow-ups, we'll begin developing those themes into projects. Session 2 on Zoom will be an interim session where we look at how the projects are progressing, and we'll do this in a workshop peer support fashion, where each student will present their project, and the others in the group will provide their feedback under my own guidance. Then this will be followed by more email follow-ups and also individual conferences if needed to get projects on track. The final session, we'll look at the final projects and any final tweaks or adjustments that they may need, but we'll also formulate artist statements. I'll give a lecture, and we'll do a workshop together on creating texts to accompany the works. Just a few sentences, perhaps 3 sentences of context for each project, so that the link between not just the novel, but the thematic underpinnings of the work are made clear. At that point, we'll also have email follow-ups and one-on-one conferences to get the projects completely ready for the January presentation at the joint session of the conference. So I'm open to any comments or questions. Let me unshare.
Well, thank you, Chris, for this presentation. First of all, I would like to thank you again for your contribution to our Sailing to Madness project. Your art project is one of the steps of or one of the following events we will be organizing for our Sailing to Madness project. And among our audience here, we have the participant students who are willing to contribute to your art project. Before them, we have guests from other American Studies departments, and we have from other Western languages departments. Before the students, dear guests, floor is open for your comments or questions. If you have any, we are looking forward. Any comments or questions? Nilgün?
Sorry for my English. Can I ask in Turkish, and Yonca may translate it in English? Olabilir mi? Yonca çevirebilir misin?
Tabii ki denerim.
Şimdi kendisi kültür tarihinin etkileyen önemli bir eser olduğu için görsel sanatlara taşındığından bahsetti. Dur kameramı da açayım. Kültür tarihinde önemli bir yer tuttuğu için görsel sanatlara taşındı dedi Moby Dick için. Ama aslında genel bir eğilim yok mu zaten? Hani şeyden de görebiliyoruz bunu. Görsel sanatlar demeyeyim ama edebi metinlerin çizgi romana uyarlanması gibi. Ya buna nasıl bakıyor merak ediyorum. Yani görsel sanatların, görselliğin bu kadar önemli olmasını veya bir eğilimin olmasını kendisi gözlemliyor mu? Bir de bunu kendisi nasıl yorumluyor diye merak ediyorum.
Thank you.
Bir de teşekkür ediyorum tabii öncelikle.
Okay. First of all, she thanks you for your presentation, and she's asking your opinion about how visual art corresponds to masterpieces of literature. Your opinion about it, and this is something collective. You know, we come across with other visual arts representations of certain literary texts. What is your opinion about this correspondence between the visual arts and literature?
Bir de özellikle şey demişti işte kültür tarihinde önemli bir eser olduğu için sanatçıların dikkatini çekti dedi. Ama zaten hani görsel sanatlara doğru bir eğilim var gibi geliyor bana.
Is it only because Moby Dick was a famous masterpiece that visual arts representations of Moby Dick is so commonplace? Or is it because there is a general inclination of visual arts towards masterpieces of literature? Am I right?
Teşekkür ederim Yonca.
Okay, you are welcome.
I think it's an interesting question. There are few novels that have generated so much visual art, at least to my knowledge. I think we have the 1950s abstract expressionists to thank for that. But why Moby Dick and not another novel? There are several, maybe there are several currents here. For one thing, the imagery of the novel is, it lends itself to the visual because Melville concentrated on visual aspects, the whiteness of the whale, for example, and that. But it's not so much. I think that perhaps as the what do you say, the archetypal universal symbology. The symbols in Moby Dick are deep psychological symbols, and maybe that is the language of symbols. Carl Jung said that the unconscious speaks in the language of symbols, and so both visual artists and writers are dealing with these symbols, which may have multiple meanings, but they're deeply unconscious and rich and create mental and visual associations, perhaps. So it may be that the symbolic nature of the novel inspires imagery simply because at the heart of both Moby Dick and of visual art is the symbol, the visual equivalent of complex ideas and emotions. Possibly. I think also, well, one scholar at least has offered the explanation that abstract artists in particular are the ones who seized on Moby Dick mostly as work, as not just illustration, not just creating visual equivalents of the narrative, but for generating entirely different but related works of art. So we have two different artistic visual art aspects to the novel. We have the illustrative, which responds to the concrete narrative and images, so white whales, Ahab, etc. And then we have the artistic responses that key to the themes of Moby Dick and not necessarily to the visual imagery. For instance, when we looked at Frank Stella's work, was the colorful abstraction on the wall. That doesn't, visually has very little to link it to Moby Dick. He's responding more to his own feeling about the book itself. Okay, so, but I wanted to say one more thing. I am aware also that some art historians believe that the abstract expressionists identified with Moby Dick because they responded to the book as a testament of the loss of belief and the loss of, well, the questioning of traditional values. Because Melville certainly questions American values in like colonialism and slavery and in progress, industrialization, 19th century American values, which we still have the legacy of in America. He throws those into question in the novel, not necessarily through the narrative, but through the extra narrative, the subtext of the novel. And for artists looking for a way forward in the 1950s that was also a break from tradition and from traditional values, all the values of painting that were inherited from the European tradition, like representation and the mimetic function of art. They wanted to break with that, but where do you go? So they had a brand new relationship with the canvas, much like Melville in the novel. He breaks with the traditional novel form, but he also is questioning the traditional values of his time in the same way that the abstract expressionists were questioning the traditional values both of their time and of their artistic tradition. So there may be a parallel there, and that may have set the precedent for continued genesis of more and more work because of that, because the novel seems to have empowered the abstract expressionist movement to a certain extent. There was like a cult of the novel among the artists who created abstract expressionism in New York in the 1950s, like Jackson Pollock and Robert Motherwell, all the big names. They all passed around this novel. They all discussed it. It was kind of like a passport. You could join the club if you knew about Moby Dick, if you could talk about Moby Dick, even if you hadn't even read it. It was in the air. It was part of the genesis of their creative acts.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Good
Nilgün. We have other guests waiting for questions. First of all, Sena, can we have your question? Sena?
Yes, of course. I'm here. I hope I'm trying to open my camera. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Hello. My question is about the material you used, actually, tar. It's unimaginable for me. It must be very difficult to shape or difficult to control, difficult to manage. I understood why you use tar, the relationship with the original product. I mean, the whale oil.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's correct. And so how do you do this? I mean, is it difficult to use on canvas, on any material? What is it? How did you do that? It is a difficult, also a little bit dangerous material, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's poisonous. So I have to wear a mask when I do it like this. And it's not difficult at all though, because I buy it already in a liquid form. So it's what they use on rooftops here to seal the roof from rain. So it comes in a big gallon like bucket, and I just pour some out, and I mix some chemical dryers to it. Same thing I would use for oil paint, and I can control how thick or how thin it gets, and so therefore I'm able to use it in right on canvas. I sometimes use it on wood. I sometimes use an automobile primer underneath. You know, what you would use when you paint a car before you put the final layer of paint on, you put a primer on, and it's a protective sealant. It protects the tar from hitting the surface of the canvas so that it won't degrade over time. The only difficulty has been how smelly it is, you know, and having to wear that thing, which I hate, very uncomfortable, and also getting it to dry properly and stay dry. Because the reason you use it on roofs is simply because it doesn't fully dry. It stays a liquid and it's very unstable. It can, when it gets hot,
Exactly.
and then it contracts. So yeah, I use a product. It's called Liquin, which is the same thing you use to make oil paints dry faster. It also dries and cures hardens and stabilizes the tar.
Yeah, I also saw that in some of your paintings there are certain thick parts. I mean, they must be the most difficult parts because they cannot get dry so easily.
Yeah.
So like the oil paint, I mean, you use it in a thick way or in a thin way. You can, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I liked Dive, and that
Okay.
one, that underwater foamy, bubbly, and also tar that I couldn't imagine. I mean, how do you get it so light and liquid? So congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
was great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'll also just say that in much of the work, there involves putting the tar on and then removing the tar. And so leaving a very thin layer, almost like a stain. And then I go into that with the paint. And that's how I can get such fine detail like in Dive. Thanks for your question.
Okay, thank you, Sena.
Thank
Züleyha,
you.
We are listening to you, Züleyha.
Yeah, hi. Mine was also a tar-related question. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very fascinated by the way you use tar because, you know, it's an environmentally unfriendly product and you're using it to create works of art that are very beautiful. So my question is, why tar?
Yeah, it's it's a good question, and I have many answers, but I do like that it is environmentally dangerous, and I explicitly want to create a parallel between the novel, which which you can see as a parable or foundational myth of what is America and what is wrong with America, what is wrong with industrialization and colonization. The Pequod is America. Ahab is the demagogue or is the corporation driving to maximize profit at the expense not only of natural resources, but of human life. That is what we are doing in America, in the world. That's what America is doing to the world. America is leading the way, I think. Anyway, that's my own maybe personal opinion, but to me, it is a direct parallel between fossil fuel over-extraction and tempting nature and on a self-destructive path. In the same way, the whaling ship of the Pequod goes after oil in the shape of a whale and also self-destructs in the process. So the tar is a perfect bridge between those two things for me. But that's not the reason I started using it. I began using it for a sort of almost random reason. When I was researching that description that Melville makes of that painting in the Spouter Inn, I came across references to another 19th century painter, Albert Pinkham Ryder, who is said to use tar in his work. And I had been thinking about Ryder anyway, and that was the impetus for me to try it, since I did not know it could be done. And then, oh, okay, you can do that. And I was thinking about that when I read that piece, and I wanted to do it in black and white, and so it occurred to me, oh yeah, Ryder, tar, I'll do it in tar. And plus, the smell of it reminds me of my childhood, where I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I lived very near an oil facility where ships would come in and they would unload oil into these huge tanks, and I used to play on those tanks as a kid. So it has a certain personal connection as well. Plus, finally, if I may, it is like alchemy to me, because tar it's this, primal matter. It's this substance is like a deathy, dark earth, chthonic and toxic. And the challenge is, can you create something beautiful with that? Can you transmute that base matter into higher state of matter, into the spiritual? Can you take the material and create something a gesture toward the immaterial, like you see in Dive, where it wants to become just pure celestial light? So I make paintings with the tar that I would not have thought to have made with just the oil paint. It's the substance itself that inspires that.
It's almost like you're creating life out of death in a way. Yes. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Züleyha. And our students, first of all, Levent is waiting, have been waiting. Firstly, Levent.
Hello. My voice is coming through. Nice. I especially liked the burning ship painting.
Oh, cool.
And the usage of tar is very reminiscent of the sort of the other, the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this, we as sort of the admirer of the painting, we're just like, staring it from far away. We don't know what is actually happening on the ship. We can sort of expect. We have a few things in our heads that we could talk about, but it is still unknown, unbeknownst to us, and it just creates this like very nice scenery, this very nice visual.
Yeah, thanks.
And the usage of tar in this sort of transmute way of creating something beautiful is I also think it's very nice, because I am a poet myself. I write poetry, and I sort of manifest from these sort of darker and these more harsher feelings that one can experience, and then try to create something beautiful out of them.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And those were my questions.
Thank you.
I mean, rather, those were my comments.
Yeah,
any questions?
that's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. The Melville stresses the indeterminacy of the whale. He has Ahab use the word inscrutable. Like, it cannot be known. It's unknown. It's other. It could be a number of things, like that painting that he describes, but we don't know what it is until Maybe we get close, or maybe we never know. And some of the paintings in the series are like that, in that they're not of any imagery. They're completely abstract. They suggest, well, not completely, they make suggestions of maybe a ship, maybe burning, but it's mostly just meant to be unknown, you know? So, yeah, but somehow beautiful.
Thank you. Iris, you may go on.
I would like to start by first saying thank you. Is my voice coming?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to start first by saying thank you for the presentation, and secondly for the visualization of Ishmael's first view of the whale in the, what was it? The first painting he saw. Yeah. That finally gave me an actual visual and it was great to see. So thank you for that. Secondly, I'm sorry for my internet connection. I'm not at a very stable place right now, so that's the second part. Thirdly, I have a two-pronged question stemming from the word irony. Do you find it ironic that the American painters such as Jackson Pollock and the others, you said something along the lines of that they were everybody was talking about Moby Dick, and that everyone, without even knowing what it's about, talked and discussed Moby Dick. Do you find it ironic? And secondly, with the words, with your medium of tar, is it, do you think, an ironic part with the gold, with the usage of gold? Do you find it ironic, or do you use it as an ironic part of your paintings? Because as like gold symbolizes in many great ways the wealth, and tar is a toxic material, as you've said. And could you comment a bit on these, please? I'm sorry that it took so long, but here I am. Okay.
Oh, it's fine. That's a great question. So two parts. So the first part, is it ironic that the painters seized on Moby Dick, even if they didn't read it? I don't think so. I think that for them, it was an inspiration because of it's such a dark tale, and because it is it's such a brave work of art in some ways. It was a failure at the time and kind of sunk, forgive the metaphor, Melville's career. And they felt, I think, that embodied a bravery and a dedication to being radical in your art and to not being afraid to face the darkness. I think that there is a dark aspect to much of the abstract expressed to Jackson Pollock and others. It's considered a little bit like violent art in a way, because it shatters the norms and it undermines, the comfort and nicety of American society as portrayed in the media. So they were shattering that illusion in some way that Melville shatters some of the illusions in Moby Dick. It is not a happy ending for anybody except the narrator. It's a dark tale. So I think they took courage from it. And the second half of your question, the use of the gold, and is there an element of irony there? Yes, absolutely. I started using the gold again by chance because somebody saw one of the paintings from a certain angle and it looked like gold leaf, and they asked me if it was gold leaf. I said, no, it's not, but I love that idea. And that's how I started incorporating it. But it's, again, just like the tar, as soon as I started putting it in, I'm like, yes, this is like capitalism. This is what the Western expansion, this is what the Western colonial project was about, was gaining riches. And it's quite literally gold in the beginning. You know, Spain was very interested in gold. And it was one of the reasons for the massacre of native peoples in South America was gold. And it is in some ways the opposite, as you say, of the tar as well, because the tar is this dark black goopy matter, and the gold is bright, shiny, clean, and sublime, almost holy. You know, it's used in religious iconography, so it's seen as transcendent of matter. So you have these two things coming together. So at an end, it's also the end of alchemy. You know, that was the idea in alchemy, was to create gold and from the base matter. So the two substances work on many levels. But I think one of the most important is the irony of the gold being the sort of opposite of the tar, and maybe not opposite, but tied to it. The two inseparable. You know, the industrialization and its dangers, and the quest for wealth and power, being two sides of the same coin here.
Thank you, Chris. And we have two more students waiting for you. Özgür, we are listening to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you for the wonderful presentation and the wonderful discussion part as well. My question will be sort of a more popular question and sort of a personal question. From time to time, we see some environmental activists gluing themselves to masterpieces in museums, and sometimes throwing things like ketchup or soup to destroy those paintings. I wonder, as a painter, what do you think about it? How do you feel as a painter when you see those scenes? And do you think, does that help with the environmental cause?
Yeah, it's a good
Thank
question.
you.
Yes, I think, you know, when I first saw those images, I felt like almost physically sick. Like, it shocked me. It's shocking to see that. I learned early on, and well, I assumed that these are great masterpieces, as you say, that they're protected by glass. If you go to museums, you know that all the great paintings are protected under almost invisible museum glass. And I confirmed that through internet searching, just because I was very worried about the works of art. But I soon realized that no, they are completely understanding they are not destroying works of art. They are creating a symbolic gesture using the art and using. So I think actually my thinking turned around, and I very much support what they're doing. I think that it's what they're saying is, well, two things. Do you care more about a painting than about human life? That's a philosophical question. But the other thing they're saying is, look, extreme environmentalists like that feel like that climate change is going to undermine, if not destroy, the foundations of Western civilization. So art, great works of art, paintings represent some of the highest, what we value most in civilization. So it's a question of like, are you willing to lose the best things that humanity has ever done? Are you willing to, because that's what's going to happen. We're going to, if we don't lose humanity altogether through extinction, through runaway climate change, we may see serious degradation of culture And we are already seeing this with the rise of fascism in certain European countries, and even in America, we are facing Trumpism and the rise of a fascist right-wing sensibility that is hostile to culture. And so, the final aspect of this is, does it work? Yes, we are talking about it. Many people got angry when they saw these images. They saw the videos thinking, oh, I believe in your cause, but this is not the way to do it. This is, going about destroying things. That's the best way to get me to not care about what you're doing, because they saw it as just a very violent, challenging fist, in the face kind of gesture. But the fact is, we are all talking about it. And I think I think it has made a very significant change into who thinks about climate change and what the stakes are. If you believe that climate change is as serious as scientists and environmentalists say it is, you have to accept that we need radical action to change course. Simply the symbolic destruction of paintings, because they are not destroyed, is actually almost not enough of a gesture to get this ship to turn around, to get people to start to pay attention and realize what is really at stake here, to realize the severity of the problem of climate. So I think it's good what they do. Plus,
Thank you. I didn't expect that. I mean, as a painter, I thought you would say, "Oh, that's horrible" or something like that. But when you think that, that's interesting. I mean, you said that they know they are not destroying those pictures. They know they are protected. So that's an interesting point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Özgür and Chris. And lastly, we have Irem. Irem, are you there still?
Yeah, thank you for the explanation of the previous question. I also really liked it. And also thank you for the presentation. It was very beautiful. I have a question about, I think it was the first painting that you showed. I checked the name, but, and also about the spoulerin, the one with the gold leaves.
Yeah.
I also had questions about tar, but now I feel more enlightened about it. So the first question I want to ask about the material tar is it a rather is it modernist or a postmodernist work material that you use? Like how tar was being used in history? Because I kind of researched it when I was curious and I couldn't really find much about it. And I also wonder, because when you were explaining your work and how you do it and how you decided to start painting about this painting at Spoulerin, I was wondering what kind of experience it was, because I'm guessing that you also read this paragraph a lot of times to experience how the painting was. And also you take in Ismail's perspective as well as Ismail's perspective on the painter themselves. And also it's in a way being a part of the book as your work of art becomes a part of the book. But when I look at the paintings, I kind of also see a rather contemporary approach, not just a romantic perspective. It also includes all of them. So I was wondering what kind of experience is it for you, or how would you describe it, that the process of coming into this?
So good. I'm so glad that you see it that way. That is absolutely the heart of why I am doing it, really, from personal perspective. I started my career as, like I said, in literature, and I wrote poetry, and my degree is in my graduate degree is in poetry, and it was my discovery of 19th century American landscape paintings that woke me up to painting in a way. I saw their work as illustrative of or embodiments of 19th century romantic values, in particular, the divinity of nature. And this is something that I've always felt myself, is that being in nature is, to me, a spiritual experience, or it can be. And I feel like, so when I began painting, I started painting from that sensibility, and all landscapes and somewhat romantic landscapes too, poetic more than maybe romantic, but they became impossible for me to continue in the same way once I learned about climate change, because I feel like landscape painting is a response to the artist's relationship to nature, at least if it's authentic. So I could no longer see nature in the same way. It would be naive, it felt, to create 19th century looking paintings of nature when we know that nature is in dire trouble. When we look at look at the rate of biodiversity loss and species loss, and the habitat loss, which has been going on for 100 years. So I was aware that 19th century artists used tar in their work, but in a very specific way, only to make the shadows, dark shadows, look more interesting and richer would they use the tar. So it was in small amounts and only as a way of just enhancing a technique that enhances the existing, program of 19th century painting, like to just to make more interesting looking shadows, they would use the tar. So tar was not used again in painting until maybe the 1950s, again, when some of these abstract expressionists started to use it again. Not a lot, though. And it's still not used very often in painting. I mean, it is somewhat, but not really in the way I've been doing it, as a kind of cross between romantic and postmodern, the way you say. I think I'm a romantic at heart. I love Walt Whitman. I love the embrace of nature. I'm an idealist, but I'm also a realist. I'm agnostic, or I'm not religious. I'm a critic of industrialization, of American consumerism. I think consumerism took the place of religion, took the place of spirituality, and it's a disaster. I think humanity is in terrible trouble. And so I have a postmodern approach, but I have a romantic heart, and so I want my work to try to be a bridge, or at least to talk about maybe the yearning for that beauty, for that wholeness, that connection to nature, which we have lost. So it has, I think, both in it, because they're both in me. That's who I am as a person, I think. So I'm glad that came through to you in the work, that you felt both of those things. So I would say the use of the tar brings the paintings into postmodernism, but my own personal sensibility is to include the romantic connection to nature, and to talk about that, talk about the loss of that connection, and the potential to maybe have it again someday. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
May I ask a question as the last one? About your title, the title of your artwork. This is also the title of the first chapter of the novel, Loomings. Loomings meaning the beginning of the end, or the signs that, foreshadow the end of things. Melville himself also sounds most of the times as an agnostic person all throughout the novel. I mean, including Neoplatonist Ishmael's perspective of being and reality, to Melville's own experience vision of life. He sounds quite agnostic as yourself. Did you find a parallel between yourself and Melville while naming your artwork as Loomings? And is there a kind of, despite being an agnostic person, is there a kind of biblical touch of Prophet Isaiah's apocalyptic prophecies of the beginning of the end. Is there a connection, the biblical connection too?
Yes, very much. Yes, yes. What is looming for us is the disasters of climate change, I think. So, quite literally, yes. And end times, that prophecy of the end times, that's very much in the air right now, And so, yeah, that was deliberate. Yes. And I just love I love that word, and what an interesting way to begin a novel, by foreshadowing the dire end.
Absolutely. Are there questions or comments? I think we are done.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Of course.
If you had the chance to use other materials, such as maybe sand, which one would you prefer? Not tar.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would use any. I don't think I would. I think it would be a different works of art, because this work is very connected to the material. Like, it comes out of the material for me. If I used something else, it would be different works of art that would emerge from it, I think. I am an oil painter primarily, so I use oil paint all the time. But this was this was a new venture for me. This is the first time I used an alternative material, and it just because it seemed so rich, because it seemed to have so many associations for me personally and for society, it became very much part of the project of the work itself. So the series was generated in a way by the choice of material, and of course by my response to Melville's novel. There was another aspect of the last question, previous question too, that I wanted to touch on, which was, also in the original question, why tar? It for me, this series was the first time that I became very authentic in my own painting. I started to really embody my own true feelings about life and, as Yonca says, of reality and being, and Neoplatonism. These are all aspects of my life that are now embedded in the work that were not in my work when I was just oil painting landscapes. Also, this was the first time I got to circle back to my literature roots in my work, because people said, "Oh, I thought you were a writer, why are you making paintings?" I said, "I don't know, it's kind of the same thing. I feel like I'm using the same kind of creative muscle, but not literally the same thing." Not, they would ask me, "Well, you write poetry, are you going to start writing, including poetry in your paintings?" And I would say, no, I don't think so. I don't see a way I want to do that. But when I found this was a way of bringing back my background in literature and all of the feelings and for the reasons that I like literature and the kind of literature I like finally came back into my painting and joined together. So this became my road forward. And I think the material itself had a lot to do with that.
Okay, thank you. İrem, one last question. İrem?
Okay, I'm sorry for adding another one, but I was really curious. So I wanted to also ask about tar again, because it fascinated us all. And I wanted to know if then tar is a material that you use to connect with the romantic feeling that you explained before, or is it a reaction? Because you said tar was used a little only. And now, like, is this used in a way of reacting how it's affected our age, or is it a way of just connecting, or both?
I think it's more the reaction to the age than anything else. Yeah, there were times that I used oil paint and made paintings that looked a little bit 19th century, that had the same kind of colors, and some of the same kind of you know, dark light and sepia tones that are in the paintings. So I already felt, and I feel like there's a connection between those colors and like 19th century photography, you know, where you see old sepia photographs. So there's a kind of nod or connection, a connection to that romantic era, but the fact of it being tar changes everything for me and makes it more like the reaction to where we are now in the world. Some people have pointed out and say, oh, they used tar on the ships too in the 19th century as a way of protecting from water. They would coat some of the sails and some of the equipment they used and the sides of the boat. They were coated in tar, just like this that I use. But that doesn't interest me. It's more like because it's a fossil fuel, you know, as you say. So another good question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, İrem. If it is, this is all. Thank you, Chris, for your webinar talk, and we will be looking forward to your teachings for our students, starting with December 1 meeting, again at Teams. I think we will be talking about your schedule with our students and about our upcoming events, especially that of the one in January 13. Züleyha Hocam, shall we farewell?
Yes, most definitely. Thank you very much for being with us. It was a very enlightening talk, and I'm sure our students took the most of it. Thank you very much for sharing your artwork with us as well. Looking forward to the workshop.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Chris.
so much.